Computer, here we go. All right, welcome to the weekly intro for chapter 17. You see, we've made the entire first 11 chapters. That first half is done. We're in the middle of the second half. So we're moving on to something called the Mystery Babylon the Great. This one diagram we showed early on, and it gives you an idea that these are separate visions. You can take the book and you can break it into chapters, which, we've done, and we can tell what chapter we're in. But scholars have also analyzed and said, well, these are separate visions that John had. The first vision lasted for the three chapters. We had the stories of the different seven churches. So we're up to vision number 11. This is a different experience. Every time the Bible says, and then John saw, or and then I saw, or and then an angel said. So these and thens are often a good break to see that you're in a new vision. And we're in a new vision tonight after the seven bowls. So we're in division 11 that we're going to study. If you think about it, in Revelation 16, we saw this judgment happening. We saw what was happening, and the judgment was considered just. Revelation 17 is going to explain why this is justified and explain that it's being done because of a religious Babylon. And we're going to talk about what Babylon means in this case. And then we're going to move on next week to Revelation 18, which is again going to elaborate on why this judgment is happening for the commercial side of Babylon. So we're looking at two different experiences. One is religion. Religion is a collection of behaviors and activities surrounded by someone's belief. You don't have to be Christian to be religious. You can be any of the world religions and be religious, and you can be an atheist and be religious. You can be religious about keeping your car clean. You can be religious about working out. You can just essentially say, these are the habits and practices I do based on my beliefs. So what we're going to see criticized tonight is the future religious Babylon. We saw the first seal open here in chapter 5, and we're going to see Christ reappear on a horse at the end of chapter 19. This is where we are right now. We're going to be introduced to something called a prostitute. The idea in the prostitute of a Bible is not only a physical prostitute where they are giving up their body for something, but also giving up their beliefs. And sometimes, prostituting yourself for money doesn't mean you actually engage in sexual interaction. It could mean that you're just willing to, quote unquote, sell your soul. So what was Babylon? Well, we may have remember the story of the Tower of Babel. So it was literally a city back in the ancient times. Its ruins still exist today. They're in the country of Iraq, and they're about 50 miles from Baghdad. So the literal city Babel existed. It's mentioned more than any other city in the Bible except Jerusalem. So Jerusalem's mentioned more, but the second reference, both literal Babel and references to Babylon, meaning kind of like Babel and a human invention, is the second one. Babel itself was founded by Nimrod, one of the famous insults from the 1950s that we used to make fun of our friends, you Nimrod. But that was actually Noah's great grandson. So it wasn't too far removed from the world after the flood. And the idea was that the wife of Nimrod was a priestess, and she was in defiance of God and was encouraging this tower that was going to be built so high by man. Man's achievement was going to trump God's, and we were essentially going to reach up into the heavens to where we could be with God as well. Kind of a throwback to Mount Olympus and the idea that we can reach our gods if we just climb high enough, and in fact we can become gods. Back to the original sin from the Garden of Eden. You can read about it in Genesis 11. And it came to represent a term. God, by the way, showed his displeasure by scattering the people and cursing them with different languages. And as a result, it was one of the ways of explaining how you went from, a ship with a single family after the flood. How the heck did we come up with, Italian and Japanese and Spanish and English and all the languages of the world? Well, this was God's way of saying, part of the way you were able to try to build this tower is there was this cooperation. I'm going to confuse you so that you can't again attempt um, to build something that's going to reach me. There's no way to do that. So that was the story behind the Tower of Babel. It's generally a term that just means anything that is associated with blasphemy, which is saying things that God forbids, persecuting those who are trying to stay faithful. So if I speak up and say, "Oh, I'm against that," oh, I'm going to be persecuted because I'm defending, um, Christ or the one true God. And of course, central to all the references to Babylon are these false gods. Baal is an example of a name of a god that was the same god worshipped in the time of Nimrod. We're going to get an introduction to Revelation 17. It is this vision, and it is a symbolic vision. I don't think we're actually going to meet a woman in our future who's going to be this person, but it's seen as a woman because it is an adulteress, someone who is willing to do things that are not appropriate in God's view for some end. So, in the case of a prostitute, she's using her body to get money, to get safety, to get security, to get whatever she's after. And that's not, what it was intended for. So God draws this comparison and says, there's a spiritual and religious deception that's behind this empire that the Antichrist is going to be leading. Um, it's seductive. It is something that we all want to be a part of, kind of like if you were able to be as famous as, a Hollywood actor and have people clamoring for your signature and, giving you money to make appearances, it could go to your head. And that's what happens in this time in the future and now over people betraying the truth of God for earthly gain. But we do get a close at the end of Revelation 17 that Christ's return is still assured, and he alone is going to be sovereign over all the kings. If we break down the chapter 17 into three pieces, this first piece, he describes this woman, and he has some attributes for her. The first is that she's sitting on many waters, and we're going to interpret that to mean really representing a whole worldwide corruption. It's not just, a criticism of Catholicism. It's not just a criticism of Islam. It's not a criticism of any particular sect. It's the whole world falling for this fake God and coming up with practices that are acceptable to the influencers, but it only if it's not the one true God. If you have to worship essentially the beast and the Antichrist. The program, the Scarlet Beast, she's riding on top of it. So it makes it initially that all the people have kind of uh, tamed and subdued this beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. And they're kind of riding on top of it. And it's almost like a religious leader using Christ to gain power. You could see it in the way that Putin has said he's wiping out the Nazis in the Ukraine, and you could see it in how other political leaders call on the cross and defending Christianity, and in fact they're going to be flipped off of riding this beast and suddenly be torn apart by it. She's identified as rich. She's wearing purple and scarlet. These are colors that are, very expensive, and therefore, only the rich are able to have it. She's holding this golden cup. So by siding with the Antichrist, initially you're in pretty good standing. The world is good for you. You are riding high, very much like, again, I'll say Hollywood superstars that, flaunt the wealth and have cars and houses. And um, she wears this name tag, this title that says it's the mother of all prostitutes and all of earth's abominations. So it's not a city, it's not a person, it's a way of life that is worshiping the false god of humans in charge, and we are going to be the god. drunk with the blood of saints, because anybody who tries to stand against her, almost like Nathan bringing bad news to David and saying, hey, this guy stole this lamb. What do you think of that? And he says, oh, that's terrible. Who is this man? And he says, it's you. You're the one who stole Bathsheba. So, when you bring bad news like John the Baptist did to Herod, they die. So if you're trying to push against this movement in the future, you're going to be persecuted, and those are going to be the martyrs. But we read in the prior chapter that those martyrs are essentially guaranteed a place in the eternity. At the end of this first section, John is amazed, and you can use another term, confounded, at this, and he needs guidance. What's nice is the mystery is then explained in verses 7 to 14. He says, okay, it's not really a beast she's on, but it's a power coming from the abyss. And we know who was thrown into the abyss and who's going to be given a chance to be revived is Satan. He also explains, and I put a red asterisk on this one because this one verse is the one that can be interpreted so many different ways. The seven heads represent something. And it's been interpreted as well as that maybe seven mountains, and Rome is the home of seven hills. So are hills mountains? And they're talking about Rome. And that's, some people raise their hand and say, I agree with that. And then some people say, no, no, it's the seven empires, such as, the Egyptian, the Assyrian, the Babylonia, and then, we get up to Rome, and then there's one more to come. Maybe they're talking about kingdoms and eras of leadership in the world. And the answer is, we don't know. So that's one of the ones that's left to, we'll either watch it from heaven or it'll be revealed to us while we're here. There's also a lot of speculation, a little quieter these days, but when the EEC, the European Economic Community, was forming, there was concern that it was Rome re-rising as the world empire. The European community was going to dwarf, the North American treaty, the US, Mexico, and Canada. It was going to be the next world power. And there was a fear that, maybe it's 10 countries, and when there's 10 leaders in that organization. And in fact, somebody pointed out, and you could see that little coin there, that the the Greek euro coin actually has a woman astride a beast on the back of the coin. And they're kind of like, uh, are they in league with the devil, or is the devil just, he can't, he has to tip his hand because he's so vain. He just wants to show you that, look, it's right under your nose. You people didn't even see it. So there's been lots of speculation about that. Is that what is that future organization? But the answer is, we're going to read the chapter and we're still just not going to know. But again, we get that reassurance that when Christ comes, he trounces this organization into nothing in a very short order. And that's the end of the evil of the world. That's when this harlot is going to fall, in verses 15 to 18, because again, it's many waters. It's not just in the 1600s and 1700s, the Presbyterian Church thought sure it was the Catholic Church that was going to be the harlot that they were describing because of the, liberties that the popes had taken. And, they were seen as the Pope as the Antichrist. So there's been lots of boogeymen over the centuries that were blamed to be this person. But the important thing is that the kings and the beast turn against the world and burn it up. And essentially, thanks for voting for me. I'm now going to take away your liberties. So that's what happens in the future. Is it sounds like you're joining with a organization that's going to care for you, and actually they rebel. And again, we're not sure. She represents a great city, and it's been speculation. Are they talking about Rome? The resurrection of Rome, as the European Union was going to say it was a new Rome, or is it America? And America has got a couple of candidates. New York, Washington, Hollywood, all kind of choices. But we're going to try to figure out which one of those is going to be. But it was just a warning that said ultimately the world's abuse, the world's uh, um, falling for worldly things and not godly things is going to be part of the downfall. It's going to be punished. And that's our intro for 17. Let me stop share and stop recording.